This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Derrell Peel, Oklahoma State livestock economist, begins today's show with a cattle market update. He says producers may currently be having to reduce their herds this year, but hopefully with more moisture, that will change. The show continues with Cottonwood Extension District's Agriculture and Natural Resources agent, Alicia Boor, as she discusses mental health. Agriculture is often a stressful career, so Alicia shares tips to help overcome difficult times. Joe Gerken, K-State Fisheries and Aquatics Extension Specialist, rounds out today's show talking about why ponds aren't clear. He says ponds are usually still fine for livestock to drink from. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today on this Monday, and we start our show on Monday, as we usually do, with a cattle market update. And in to do that today is Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel. Derrell, thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Happy to be here.
Now, we're going to just go ahead and get started, kind of as we usually do, with fed and feeder cattle markets.
The feeder cattle markets in particular are, really strong, at least this past week. The markets continued up. It depends on which weight of animals you're talking about. The calves, again, if we had a normal seasonal pattern, would have peaked about a month ago probably and started coming down. I didn't really expect that to happen because we've got such a strong uptrend in place in this market, and that certainly continues, as well as for the big feeder cattle, which typically are going up seasonally anyway this time of the year, or are beginning to. Those markets continue strong. I think we're going to talk about moisture here just a little bit, but the fact that we've gotten some rain in some key areas in the central and southern plains probably also adds to that strength in the market. Fed cattle markets, they've been kind of moving sideways here recently. This, maybe a little bit lower this past week, but they've been basically just kind of fluctuating in the lower part of the 170s range for live cattle on a live basis. They peaked about a month ago, and again, seasonally, they would normally be coming down. I don't look for them to drop a lot farther because, again, I think there's underlying support that's pulling this market higher. So maybe they kind of offset and we continue a little bit sideways here going forward.
And Derrell, you hinted at it. We're going to talk a little bit about moisture and how that's maybe affecting the cattle market. Before we got started, you said Oklahoma's gotten some rain in the northwest region. And as Chip alluded to on Friday, we've also gotten some rain in Kansas. And so how have we seen that impact the cattle market?
Well, I think it's going to have significant impacts. I don't know that it is yet, although it's possible some of what we're seeing in the feeder cattle markets is a almost instant reflection of that improvement in moisture conditions. But what I'm really looking at, of course, is the longer cattle cycle and the whole notion of herd liquidation. The four states of Kansas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas now have the majority of the severe drought in the country. And that's a region, of course, that's very important. About 32% of the beef cows in the country are in those four states. So improvement in pasture conditions is a key to longer term to setting the stage for stopping herd liquidation and actually turning around to see herd expansion. Herd expansion is not going to happen right away, but the moisture we're getting may, as we go through the next few weeks, and particularly if we continue to see moisture and improvement in pasture conditions, at least over the course of the next few months, will stop the liquidation that I think is still occurring or has been in this region. And that'll set the stage then on a broader scale for stabilizing the herd first and then setting the stage for herd expansion. If not this year, at least, more likely next year.
So would you say moisture is really a key element to slowing, if not stopping, herd liquidation to hopefully kind of flip the coin and see expansion?
Absolutely. The timing is critical. We've already, in these areas that have drought, we've already lost some production, but any rain we get now is very timely. It will jumpstart some pasture and some hay production. And so it at least maybe helps salvage part of our normal production year. So the sooner we get it, the more we get now. the more likelihood that we can see things turn around here from the standpoint of herd liquidation. And what'll really be the key as we go forward, probably noticeable this fall, is that we will start to see significant heifer retention that will be the key to herd expansion. And I think, that's most likely going to show up this fall.
And Derrell, continuing to talk about the market, how about the box beef cutout?
Yeah, box beef is, again, seasonally usually peaks in late April, early May. At the wholesale level, that's when we're doing the buying for Memorial Day weekend, getting ready for the summer grilling season. That's right upon us now with Memorial Day just ahead of us. And so, the box beef market has pulled back a little bit. Again, that might be a seasonal thing, but I think the key going forward is how does the Memorial Day weekend really look in terms of, broadly speaking, is the weather good around the country? Are folks able to get out and do some grilling, do some outdoor activities and those sort of things? And so, we're still watching, this market from not only from a seasonal standpoint, but just the fact that beef demand has been remarkably resilient over many months now through a lot of volatility, but yet we continue to watch it just in case that some signs show up of some weakness there. And we know going forward that there's going to be less beef. Beef production is declining, so there's going to be even more pressure on that wholesale and retail beef market as we go forward.
So even though we'd love some rain, if it could hold off for people to go grill and support Memorial Day, that would be okay.
There you go. That would be the best of all worlds if we get rain before and after Memorial Day weekend. There's some folks farming that also need a little break in here at some point, maybe to finish up planting. But from the standpoint of pasture and hay conditions, we need the rain sooner rather than later.
And talking about forages and grain and things that are obviously very important to cattle and helping them grow and raise and everything within livestock there. Recently, we've talked with Guy Allen about the WASDE report, and every Friday we have Dan O'Brien come on and talk about the grain market. And I feel like there's a lot of connection there with things that are happening in the grain market and how those reflect into the cattle market.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the issues in cattle markets on top of the drought issues and all of those things has been the fact that we've had elevated feed costs, corn markets leading the way, but all other feed grains. And that's translated into, high cost of gain and continued upward pressure over the last 2 years, really, in terms of feedlot cost of gain. The conditions now in terms of the crop market, the corn market in particular, looks like planting is going very well this year. Conditions have been very good. The acreage is projected to be up. So, it's not made yet, and we've got a long ways to go. We got to get through the summer and see what the yields turn out to be. But the prospects are, looking better and better for the idea that we're going to see some increase in corn production that will moderate these feed prices a little bit from the standpoint of livestock industries. And
I had a friend recently say that the concern was that they're running out of forage and was talking about their liquidation, running out of forage. But the concern was the new forage and their new grain and feed isn't growing. Yeah, that's right. We've seen it's that time of the year. And I've talked to some producers recently and they say, if you drive out from the road, the pastures look green. Things, look like they're greening up nicely. But if you actually get out and walk in them, they're really thin. There's just not a lot of growth there. And that's a function of what we've been in. We've been in a lot of drought and a lot of, stressful conditions there. So that's another good point in that it's going to take some time for these pastures to heal up. That's not an instant process. We got to start somewhere. So we're getting some of that start now, at least, with the rain that we're getting in some areas. We need rain in other areas anyway, but it will take some time for these pastures to heal up. So for producers, what's a big key message that you'd like to tell them, maybe as they're looking at the cattle markets and trying to decide what they want to do moving forward for their herd? In terms of the broader market, I think what cattle producers really want to focus on is sort of the timing of what we know is going to happen. The stage is pretty well set from a cattle cycle standpoint and the drought impacts standpoint that numbers are small. We are going to try to rebuild. We're going to do a lot of heifer retention, which is going to push feeder cattle prices even higher.
all cattle prices, really. But the question has been, and still is to some extent, the timing of when that really kicks in. So we're watching these rain events and the drought conditions. That'll be the key to when this industry really kicks off a rebuilding effort, and that will be the key then, and set the stage for what we can expect for these feeder cattle markets going forward.
So, Derrell, some hope for some rain, but hopefully everyone also has a good Memorial Day. I appreciate you coming on and giving us an update on the cattle markets.
You bet. I hope everyone has a great weekend.
That was Oklahoma State University livestock economist Derrell Peel giving us this week's cattle market update. He discussed how herds might currently be liquidating, but hopefully we'll be able to see the flip side of that and see expansion in the upcoming years. If you would like to stay up to date with work that Derrell Peel is doing with his fellow colleagues at Oklahoma State University, you can do so by subscribing to his Cow-Calf Corner newsletter. To do that, that will be linked in today's show notes, as well as his email address, which you can send him an email requesting to be subscribed to the newsletter. And his email for that is derrell.peel@okstate.edu. The spelling for his name right there is DERREL.PEEL@okstate.edu. Looking forward to the rest of Agriculture Today, we're going to be joined by Alicia Boor, who's going to discuss mental health, as agriculture can often be a very difficult career, and some ways to hopefully help overcome those difficult times. We're then going to be joined by K-State Fisheries and Aquatics Extension Specialist Joe Gerken, as he discusses why your ponds might not be cleaned. If you're reaching your destination and don't want to miss out on the rest of today's show, as always, you can find it on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be joined by Alicia Boor when we come back. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so that's a topic we wanted to talk about here today on Agriculture Today. And to join us to talk about it is Agriculture and Natural Resource Agent from Cottonwood Extension District, Alicia Boor. Alicia, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously a topic that sometimes is pretty heavy and hard to talk about, but something we think is important to producers. And so just to get started, what is mental health?
Mental health is just basically, how are you feeling? And we always tell people to, exercise to keep your body strong and healthy, and eat the correct things to be able to stay healthy, and keep your heart healthy. And your brain is just another organ that needs to be kept healthy. And sometimes, because there's been such a stigma against mental health, it's hard to think about trying to keep your brain healthy like you do other parts of your body. But it is just as important to keep your brain healthy as it is to keep your heart healthy by exercise or medication or a good diet or any of those things.
In the industry of agriculture, what are some issues or what are some barriers that you're finding hard to cross to talk about this subject?
There's a couple different things that have been opportunities to try to find solutions. One of the major things, farmers are multi-generational farmers. We have a lot of people around here, fourth, maybe even fifth generation farmers that have farmed the same ground. And so when you go back and think of the grit and the strength that somebody had to have to settle this land around in Kansas and be able to survive through the past 100 years, all of that to be able to dig down and rely on yourself and be able to create a crop and raise a family and be able to persevere through adversary is a fantastic amount of traits to have. But those traits on being able to stand on your own and want to solve everything yourself also create a way that it makes it difficult to ask for help. And sometimes with mental health, you have to ask for help, whether it's a doctor to get medication or to talk to a counselor or anything like that. Asking for help because you need help is something that a farmer a lot of times can have a problem trying to cross that barrier. So getting people to talk about mental health is one of the first opportunities that we're trying to get past. Another thing is that producers are by themselves a lot. Yeah, they'll come in to the co-op and pick up supplies and stuff, but sometimes they can go weeks without talking to anybody other than their family. And that's a lot of time to think about bad things if you've got bad thoughts on your mind. And there's not a lot of distraction when you are out spraying a field or anything like that, that it's just up and down a field. That's a lot of time that your mind can wander, especially with some of our new technology that is kind of self-driving. I mean, that gives you even more time to think about things that you may not want to think about. The last thing is, in rural areas, there's not a lot of access to healthcare. Healthcare for your body or your mind. It's really hard to be able to find mental health facilities. And then also trying to get a producer to schedule, I will be there at 2:00 on Tuesday. Well, if you have a calf that needs to be pulled out of the cow, you're going to skip your appointment. It's very hard to be able to say, I can do this at this point. And so we are working on those barriers, and we are trying to talk more about mental health, which is really exciting to see how more and more people are willing to open up and talk about their own personal stories or listen to somebody else's story. So we're starting to hopefully break down those barriers. And then some of the rural initiatives where we're getting better internet, we're getting better cell phone service out in the middle of nowhere. That's going to help with telehealth and teletherapy, where people can check in with a therapist through email, text, or even an appointment just on the palm of your phone. Some of those things are going to help overcome some of these obstacles that we see.
And if someone right now is sitting there and listening to Agriculture Today, you mentioned that pulling your mind away from kind of those bad thoughts. What are a few of your favorite ways to pull your mind out of kind of that sometimes dark spiral?
I will say I am an avid exerciser. I have a dog that I swore that I needed a dog that did not need a lot of time. And I have a dog that requires at least 3 miles of a walk a day. And so I get out and exercise, and I go fast, and building a sweat just makes me feel better. That's something. And I always tell people, you don't have to walk as fast as I do. You don't even have to do the 3 to 6 miles I do. Go out for a 15-minute walk and clear your mind. I like listening to good music. Some of my favorite music is a little bit hard rock, which makes me go faster, which makes me happier. And then there are so many podcasts out there anymore that are just fun to listen to. And so a comedy podcast or something like that, or I like science, so I find science podcasts, that takes your mind off of, even if it's for 15 minutes, off of what you've been thinking about and gets you thinking about something else, like, fun science facts that other people don't know that you can, say at a party or something like that. So, those are some of the things that I like to do. And there's so many more out there. Meditation's a great one. Meeting up with friends is good, especially if they're people that you're going to be willing to talk with. And then honestly, being willing to, and having the strength to take that first step. If you have that, admitting it and moving forward, whether it is, I just need to talk to my friends to get this out, or I need to find ways to enjoy things, or even I need a counselor, or I need to talk to my doctor. Having that strength to take that first step. It's really hard to do, but it's important, and it's something you won't regret.
What are some few steps of making sure that you know what your time of year is, if usually is not as great, to kind of prepare for that moment in time?
One of the new buzzwords that's kind of out there is self-care. Yeah, you hear it, but if you really think about it, it is very important. I know we get really busy in extension around fair time. If you talk to any extension agent, fair time is a very hectic time. So about a couple weeks ahead of time, I will take a day off and go do something that I enjoy. You may not be able to do that if you've got, let's talk about calving, when your calves are going to start. So if you could schedule, a couple weeks ahead of time, a day to go to a movie or to go do something for a couple hours that really helps build you up so that you know that you can get through those stresses at a later time. And then while you're having those stresses, take a step back and say, okay, how am I doing? You can't always control your time, but you can take 30 seconds to take a breather and be like, okay, how am I doing? And then afterwards, if you're still struggling, that's when you would want to call and ask for help if you need it.
When I think of a traditional farmer, I think of my father, who has always been on a family farm. But really, it includes people, in their teens and young 20s, all the way up to people that are my grandparents' age. And so what are some of those programs and resources that these people could look into?
I'm actually a team leader for our stress and resiliency transdisciplinary team, which is a very, very long way of saying we have mental health resources that we can come and teach. We have something called QPR, which is a suicide awareness program that basically it's like CPR for the brain. It teaches you how to recognize signs of stress and suicide tendencies, to be able to ask the questions that you might need to ask to see if somebody is suicidal, and then be able to help them get to the resources and the professionals that they would need to help them get through that crisis. It's similar to CPR, where somebody, when you're doing CPR, you are basically keeping the body alive until the professional gets there. And so QPR is the same way for suicide awareness and mental health struggle. We also have mental health first aid and mental health first aid for teens that we can teach. And then we also have a farm and stress program out of Michigan State that we can teach to producers or anybody in the community. I mean, especially that QPR, we can teach that to anybody in the community. And we have agents that are trained on all of these all throughout the state of Kansas. So you can go and search for the Stress and Resiliency team on K-State Research and Extension's website, and it'll pull up our resource page so that you can see people in your area that you can contact to get some of these trainings. K-State also has the Kansas Agriculture and Mediation Service, and I have told producers in the past, just give them a call if you have a question. They have lawyers on staff, they have mediators, facilitators. For any portion of farming, they have resources, or they can guide you to the resources that you may need. So if you are looking at farm succession, if you are struggling financially, if you are having issues with leasing arrangements or anything like that, you can call them, and they have a sliding scale on how much they charge, and it's a lot less than your traditional lawyer down the street would cost, and they don't turn anybody away as long as you're in agriculture. Those are some sources that are really, really great. We also have our farm management program, which is more of the taxing and budgeting side, but that is throughout the state of Kansas, and it's a fantastic resource as well. And in all honesty, call your local extension office. All of us can guide you into what you might need. We're masters of being able to find out the answer to any of your questions.
Alicia, a lot of great information there. I appreciate you taking the time to share it with us today.
Certainly. I'm glad I was able to make it.
That was Agriculture and Natural Resource Agent from Cottonwood Extension District, Alicia Boor. The resources that she mentioned will be found on agtoday.net in our show notes for today's show. We are cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. We end this Monday's programming, as we usually do, with a wildlife segment. And in to do that is K-State Fisheries and Aquatics Extension Specialist, Joe Gerken. Joe, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Now, you wanted to talk about why our pond water isn't clear.
Yeah, so a lot of people are sitting out by their ponds this time of year, and, they have in their mind that their pond's going to be a perfect crystal clear, no color to it at all. So I wanted to talk about some of the reasons why we have dirty or discolored water, and is that a concern?
And so you mentioned possibly algae, sediment. Those are two of the little concerns, but how'd those end up in our pond?
Sure. So the two most common reasons that our ponds aren't crystal clear, the number one is turbidity, and that's suspended sediment. And so if you think about the bottom of a pond is usually muddy. So if we get any disruption, that can be from anything as simple as a little bit of wind causing waves can suspend some of that sediment. It can be something, longer term, where you have things that have been going on in the watershed, washing in sediment, or livestock are a big example where they're tromping around at the bottom, suspending a lot of that sediment. So those are kind of the big reasons on the brown side. If you have a lot of suspended sediment, your pond might look a little brownish color. You also might see a pond that looks greenish in color, and that's because of phytoplankton. And phytoplankton are single-celled, really small little algae, little plants that are growing. And when we add things like phosphorus or fertilizer to a pond to make it eutrophic, those algal cells just like to erupt and grow really, really fast. And so you start to see kind of a greenish, murky color. So turbidity and phytoplankton, the two main causes that your water isn't clear.
And is this a concern?
Normally it's not a concern. One of the things that we can see if you have a lot of suspended sediment, it can release some nutrients, so disrupting the benthos to the bottom of the pond. Livestock can release phosphorus or other nutrients, so that might be a concern. Normally the discoloration just doesn't look pretty, so people are kind of wondering, hey, why does it look different? What can we do?
So I know I like my water to drink nice and clear. If producers are wanting to clean up their pond, is this something they should really worry about doing, or just let nature take its course?
Sure. So there are some examples where you might want to fix up your pond and make the water more clear. And there are some things you can do to fix that up. Adding alum or aluminum sulfate is a very common thing to do. In order for those to work, you really have to know your water quality. So make sure you do a water quality test and contact a professional before you decide that you're going to move forward adding alum or aluminum sulfate. One of the easy things that you can do to kind of figure out what the issues are is called a jar test. So you can take some of your pond water in a clear jar and set it somewhere overnight. So set it in in your garage or something where it's not going to be disrupted overnight. And come back the next day and see if the sediment has settled out, if there's a layer of dirt or clays at the bottom of the jar, or if it still is all suspended. If it's really suspended, it's colloidal clay. It's really, really small particles, and that's when that alum or aluminum sulfate might come in handy.
And so is it still safe for livestock to drink out of?
Yes, so almost always it is safe. I say that with a caveat because there are some reasons that turbidity could be there where it would be unsafe. You might have excessive runoff from agriculture fields, adding a lot of nutrients, for example. It could get to a level that it would be unsafe. Generally, though, the water is still safe. It's just not as pretty as it could be. One thing you could do is keep your cattle out of the pond itself. That'll keep them from disrupting the bottom. It's also better for the cattle or the livestock that you have. They grow better if you can pump that water to an alternative source. There are some benefits there, but it's generally safe. A lot of people might confuse it with blue-green algae, cyanobacteria. We're starting to see those pop up this time of year. Those tend to be on the surface in a really odd color, like a bright green, John Deere green kind of color. So we can see them in all colors, but they wouldn't be suspended. They wouldn't be causing all of your pond water to be a different color.
So, Joe, really an update that your pond water is probably okay, even if it's not clear and you want to drink out of it, your livestock probably can.
Right. Your livestock probably can. I wouldn't recommend you take a cup and fill it up and take a swig. So.
Sounds like some good news. I won't go around drinking my pond water at home anytime soon. Joe, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That was Kansas State University Fisheries and Aquatics Extension Specialist Joe Gerken informing us on why pond water might not currently be clear. That's all we have for you on Agriculture Today for this Monday. However, we'll be back with you tomorrow.